And our empire requires that its capital be invested in weapons of war, far beyond any rational need. After all, every dollar spent on a bomb that will go out and blow out a school overseas is a dollar that's stolen from you, is a dollar that could have been spent on a school here. Could have gone to your roads, could have fixed your potholes, could have fixed our infrastructure, could have paid for healthcare, and yet, instead, that dollar goes to blowing up other countries overseas.
Let's get it. One solution. Say one solution. One solution. One solution. One solution. One solution. Make some noise, y'all. Make some noise, y'all. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rafael Gonzalez. I'm a student organizer with Stanford SJP. Let's get this off the stand. And I will be your MC for this evening. It's an honor to be able to talk in front of everyone here and to be in the presence of the many thousands in chat. So what's up, y'all? Before we begin, some housekeeping. Attached to the chairs in front of you is a QR code leading to a questionnaire for the Q&A section. We have a great team in the back that will be reviewing your questions with Hasan to be asked during the Q&A section. We're looking for questions that engage in good faith conversation, that definitely do challenge Hasan's ideas presented during the event, and that encourage wide discussion. We will not select bad faith and argumentative questions. We ask that you take some time to listen to them and to respond with your questions. We will be having no ins and outs during the event. You are stuck in here. Please, 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 no disruptions of any kind. We won't stick the police on you, but it's just not polite. Please take notes, sit back, and with that, allow me to open. Friends, folks, we live in a time where it has never been more clear the wars that the United States and that the American empire is waging. We live in a time where there is war at home and war abroad. At home, we witness the violence that ICE inflicted in Minneapolis and across the nation, separating families, abducting our neighbors, and murdering them in cold blood on our streets. Working families are struggling to afford rent. We in the Bay Area are facing the worst affordability crisis for housing in the whole nation. Each year, healthcare becomes more and more expensive. Millions of working people are struggling to meet their basic needs, all while the billionaires, the ones who always put their hand on the scale of our legislature, are only getting wealthier. Wealthier from continuing to exploit our work and the little that we make. I know this as a first-gen low-income student at this institution. We see the billionaires not only profit from the war here, but also from the wars abroad. From the ongoing genocide in Gaza, which has killed tens of thousands of children, the blockade and starvation of the Cuban people, to abducting President Maduro in pursuit of imperialist regime change against international law, to waging a new forever war against Iran. From all of this, the handful of billionaire-led corporations like Lockheed Martin, like Palantir, Chevron, HP, Google, etc., they continue to grow at the cost of millions of people murdered abroad and hungry and starving children in this nation. And our politicians, and make no mistake, our universities are very, very happy to just roll out the red carpet for these billionaires. Yet the understanding of this unfairness is what has made thousands of our people across the nation wake up And here at Stanford, it is what has led to the students beginning to truly organize. Because the truth is, we have no other option. Here at Stanford, we have seen how our universities operate as corporations instead of places of learning, seeking to maximize profit at every turn and at every expense to the students and the workers of this university. And that's especially since the start of the genocide in Gaza. It has become clear that Stanford University cares only about protecting its brand and its purse. We saw how Stanford has bent over backwards for Trump's administration and his demands for eliminating DEI in universities. And so, as a result, we have seen Stanford cut funding from grad programs, disciplining progressive protesters for standing for justice, and perhaps most critically, criminalizing pro-Palestine students and systematically attempting to repress our voices. I myself am one of 11 students and alumni of Stanford University who are currently facing 3 years in prison on 2 felony counts for a sit-in at the university president's office in 2024. I appreciate the support, y'all. This is all while the district attorney of Santa Clara County has raised thousands of dollars through campaign events where he flaunts our unjustifiable prosecution and persecution. And Stanford, the university that has incubated half of the companies on the BDS list, Stanford, the university that hosts war criminal child killer Condoleezza Rice as director of the Hoover Institute, Stanford, the corporation country club pretending to be a university, stands in quiet support of our prosecution. And so the big question, what is to be done? Well, if you're asking me personally, I would say for you to go to bit.ly/S11 Action Toolkit to try and keep me out of jail. That'd be really nice, y'all. But more seriously and more directly, that exact question, what is to be done, is why I'm here today and not letting my university and my government scare me into submission. It's why you all are here today, and it is why we also have the internet's most prominent socialists here today. We have to fight back, folks. Even with the violence and repression from the US government, from our institutions, the people have not cowered. From Minneapolis to Los Angeles to our own campus, in the face of repression, our communities only fight back harder and stronger. And they learn each time they fight back. See, this university, this government, they think they can silence us. They think they can scare us. They think they can distract us, but they can't. Even with this event, y'all are seeing it right now, moving us from a 1,700 seat venue that sold out about as fast as Bernie Sanders sold out to this smaller 300 person venue and imposing all these insane restrictions on us. It just makes it clear how powerful Hasan's voice is and those ideas, how powerful progressive politics are, and how powerful we are when we stand together, when we organize. They are afraid of the power of the people united, of our voices, of our ideas. They are scared of the fact that we can build an alternative system that meets the people's needs. A system where teachers don't have to go on strike to get a livable wage. A system where healthcare is available to everyone freely. A system where no one is left unhoused. They're scared of that future because it means less money for them. But we can make that world, that future, where no more bloody wars are waged, and where every student, no matter what university they are, where they are, can get an affordable and a free education without having to go to a school that builds bombs for genocide. We saw the power of mobilization. We saw on January 23rd in Minneapolis when the whole city went on strike. We saw on January 30th where hundreds of cities around the country went on strike. And we saw it this past weekend with millions of people walking out with No Kings protests all across the nation. We have the power. And we all must not only mobilize to these protests, but organize. And that's one of the main things we're going to be talking about today, folks, because today is a stepping stone Today is a stepping stone, and we're going to ask you all to come out of this event and think not only of the horrors that the wealthy elite commit to perpetuate and grow their own wealth and power, but think of how we, the people, can build our own power. We're going to think and discuss of how we can build and grow our own organizations. We're going to think of how we can build our communities. We're going to think of how we can build a better future and a tomorrow for all of us. And if you want the keys and the guidance for how to do that, then pull out your notebook, pull out your notes app, and start taking notes. Because Hasan is here, and he has a lot to say. So, folks, everyone, introducing you to our speaker for the evening. He is a streamer. He is a content creator. He is a writer. He is an anti-Zionist. He is a socialist. And maybe, by listening to the progressive perspectives he holds, perspectives that have historically been marginalized, we can have a couple answers to our big question of what is to be done. So I ask you all, with your hands, with your voices, make some noise and welcome Hasan Piker, everyone.
Wow, that's going to be a tough speech to follow. Real yapper, this guy. I was in the other room listening to Donald Trump on the side, and I just wanted to inform you guys, it's a victory. Total, complete victory in Iran. It's over. We did it! Hold on. Never mind, actually, we're still continuing the war, it seems. But who knows, maybe it'll be a victory tomorrow. Obviously, I was, I think, initially supposed to speak in a much larger room and potentially even debate a Zionist campus college professor here, but none of them wanted to do it. I don't know why. On whether or not occupied people have a right to resist. And, I mean, yeah, they do, obviously, but, you know, that would have been great for Jewish Insider. They could have gotten as many clips as they possibly can off of that one. Maybe continue the conversation for another week about whether or not politicians should endorse me as though I'm running for office. But we're going to be talking about Stanford University, Silicon Valley, tech, and imperialism, because we're in unique times. So let's start. I wrote a speech for you guys as well. Okay. First of all, I want to start off by saying thank you for having me. I'm honored. I want to begin my remarks with a quote from the writer Gore Vidal. Empires are restless organisms. They must constantly renew themselves. Should an empire start leaking energy, it will die. I think, looking at the state of affairs in the Middle East, we can safely say that the American empire is more than just leaking energy. Ever since the end of the Cold War, the United States has been the shot caller in world politics, the only superpower left standing. But if America won the Cold War, then why do we still have such a large military? It's a question I ask myself all the time. Why are we left with this national security state? This problem of a lack of a real enemy has vexed us ever since. The American empire is a restless organism. But that hasn't stopped us. We just started to pick on smaller and smaller guys, little guys all around the world, right? After the first Gulf War against Saddam Hussein's Iraq in 1991, it was Colin Powell who said, famously, "I'm running out of villains. I'm down to Castro and Kim Il-sung." And ever since he said those words, we've kept the war going. For decades, we've punished Iran, Iraq, Cuba, Palestine, North Korea, Venezuela, and many other nations. And we've kept the war going in a number of different ways. Perhaps the most important and unacknowledged has been the US sanctions regime. A 2024 analysis by the Washington Post found that as many as a third of all countries in the world are under some kind of US economic sanction. I recently visited the country of Cuba, where American sanctions and a trade embargo have been in place for over 6 decades. And I can tell you from what I saw that American sanctions are a deadly weapon, absolutely, excluding and financially penalizing smaller nations. According to a study published by The Lancet, the medical journal, the sanctions imposed by the United States or European Union were associated with 564,000 deaths per year between 1971 and 2001. Sanctions can take so many lives, and no one ever has to fire a gun or drop a bomb. But America does have guns. America also has bombs, and it has missiles, and expensive jets, and military bases all over the globe, and we pay for it instead of paying for housing, paying for education, paying for welfare, or literally anything else at all. And we have an arms industry that buys off Washington with lobbyists, and if we're being honest, buys off the country with decently paying industrial labor as well. Some of you might even end up working at some of these companies, given, we're at Stanford University today. But, as Gore Vidal put it, the American empire is leaking energy. Successive rounds of imperial misadventure have made us weak. So has the phase of capitalism that we're in, one that prioritizes speculation, financialization, in other words, ways of accumulating capital that leave less for common people than ever before. This way of life has weakened us. Our empire is coming to an end. And to that I say, thank God. To begin with, I believe that the American empire is a bad bargain for Americans. A lot of people might get mad at me and say, well, I'm a third worldist. As a matter of fact, it's actually pretty good in comparison to the third world, but it is. Now, it's objectively true that we do benefit in the imperial core. The empire benefits Americans in many ways. The dollar's reserve currency status, cheaper fuel costs, all for the good stuff from being the richest place on the planet. But our empire has a tax. Periodically, we send our own people off to other countries that die in a mission with no real strategic purpose. We have a limited and very expensive form of socialism for veterans, and even that is lackluster. And our empire requires that its capital be invested in weapons of war, far beyond any rational need. After all, every dollar spent on a bomb that will go out and blow out a school overseas is a dollar that's stolen from you, is a dollar that could have been spent on a school here. Could have gone to your roads, could have fixed your potholes, could have fixed our infrastructure, could have paid for healthcare, and yet, instead, that dollar goes to blowing up other countries overseas. Now, all of this, I think, is pretty obvious to most people, especially you in this room. In the first weeks of this new third Gulf War, fewer than a fifth of all Americans approved of it. That was before Donald Trump's MAGA cult decided that they were actually on board with it. In 2024, they voted for less inflation, and it's hard to see how a spike in the price of oil will deliver anything but historic inflation. The Trump people and all the other pro-war forces in government and media, well, they don't really have many options. The only way to make this all work is to lie. They have to buy TV networks, they have to buy Hollywood studios, they have to buy TikTok from China, and they have to flood the airwaves with their own propaganda, and they have to smear their enemies. And that's something I know quite a bit about, personally. But the pro-war, pro-empire forces in America, they have disadvantages too. The biggest one is manufacturing consent, to use an old phrase that may be falling out of fashion as of late. These days, almost nobody is bought in. People are very skeptical of mainstream narratives. And a big reason for why that's the case is the internet. In particular, the social media platforms that come from here, the heart of Silicon Valley. Ever since World War II, One of the greatest exports of the United States was our culture. I am a byproduct of that. I grew up in Turkey my whole life, and yet I sound American, I look American, I consumed American products my whole life growing up. I wanted to come here. I believed in the American dream until I got my first hospital bill, and then I was like, oh, this is yikes. But America's forces of cultural imperialism are also waning around the world. We have our TV networks, we have our Hollywood studios, our magazines, our books, and a huge chunk of all of that spread a pro-empire ideology all around the world. These days, it's also American-owned social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, that are the conveyor belts of world culture. But the catch is that despite running these platforms, there is more anti-empire sentiment rising than ever before. This is, I think, pretty ironic. The Spanish-American War, arguably the beginning of the American empire, was started in the yellow press. But now, the information people consume, especially since the start of Israel's post-October 7 genocide, the information people consume is guiding them towards anti-empire thoughts and beliefs. And a big part of that is because I think people's material conditions are unwinding and the contradictions are worsening. It's impossible not to notice, because it's certainly not because of the political education of the average American. They're not exactly very class conscious. Now, I think this kind of techno-feudalist control can also at the same time reinforce American hegemony. There's a lot of frivolous stuff that gets attention. For example, the world economy is about to collapse, and yet for the past week or so, if you've been on Twitter or if you've gone and read the Jewish Insider publication or numerous others, they're talking about me for some weird reason. They're talking about my Twitch stream and which candidates I associate with, which is ridiculous. But the most important information isn't reaching people. A recent Harvard-Harris poll found that, yes, while the war was unpopular, also 76% of voters think that America's winning the war. Unbelievable. It's cattle, really. Anyway, Americans in their hearts still believe we're invincible. Americans believe in American exceptionalism still. People are, I think, unprepared for the economic and political calamity that seems to be on its way. I want to end my remarks tonight with this. Silicon Valley's biggest companies rode the smartphone and social media to greater riches than any other sector of the economy anywhere else in the world. It appears that Silicon Valley's next phase will be all about artificial intelligence. Although AI could disrupt many industries and its collapse could pop a huge economic bubble, one of my biggest fears these days is about AI and the military. Increasingly, the new tech giants of our day, such as Palantir, yuck, OpenAI, Anthropic, they see their role as supporting the American empire. These companies help the military develop kill lists. They help intelligence agencies do spy work. And they, of course, do so much more than we even know about. Israel also utilized AI in their kill lists and their targeting systems as well, something that we are learning from them. The American empire is leaking energy, leaking the power that has made it work for over a century. But as you know, there are powerful forces, merchants of death, who are ready to profit and profit and profit, even as the empire dies. A challenge for your generation at Stanford will be to confront these forces head on. You know this better than me. You live here. They've probably been talking about Peter Thiel since orientation, I assume. But that makes your work even more important. The Cuban patriot Jose Marti once said of living in the United States that he had lived in the belly of the beast, and thus he knew it well. You all live in the belly of the beast. You know it well. Use the knowledge to fight it for a better world. Sound the alarm on techno-fascist danger. Stand up for the poor and the dispossessed. Free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hasan, for that wonderful speech. If everyone could give another round of applause. All right, so we all know who Hasan is, but today we have two moderators here, me and Iman, and we're here to have a conversation, a really chill conversation with Hasan, and then we'll be opening it up to the crowd, as Ramon said, in the last 20 minutes, so please send in any questions with the QR codes in the audience. But first, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Juhei Song. I'm an organizer here with the Stanford Asian American Action Committee, or SAC, where SAC is an Asian American socialist and anti-imperialist organization. If you want to learn more about us, please scan the QR codes. I'm also an organizer with the PSL, or the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Shout out Bay Area. And I'll be your first moderator here today.
Hi everyone, I'm Hina Zarish, and I'm an organizer with Stanford SJP. We're organizing on Palestine campus. Make sure to leave the room today, having filled out the form and getting involved as soon as possible. We need as many of us in the movement right now, so yeah.
All right, cool. To start it out with, so you've talked a lot about this. We talked about the empire. We see what's going on in Iran. Trump right now is giving his address talking about what's going on in Iran. In the past year, we've seen a lot of escalations, as you mentioned. We've seen the genocide in Gaza continue. We've seen the blockade in Cuba, which you visited. We're seeing the ongoing war in Iran with alleged boots on the ground, perhaps soon. To start it off with, how do you kind of specifically see the interconnections of how the U.S. empire is working, not only historically, but specifically now? Like, why now are we seeing all of these escalations, and how do you want us to interpret this?
I think that Donald Trump is the perhaps purest expression of American rage and American imperialism that we've ever seen. He's very vulgar. He says the quiet part out loud. And in many respects, that's part of the reason why they like him. And this works for, domestic policy. And maybe, God forbid, it might work for foreign policy as well. It has been really funny seeing people like Matt Iglesias and all these other famous liberals, famous writers that have spent an entire lifetime talking about how America has to be the world police and put this liberal intellectual patina on American imperialism fall apart every single time Donald Trump just comes out and says, I'm going to go to Venezuela for oil. I want to invade Venezuela for the oil. It's for nothing else but the oil. And everyone's like, whoa, that doesn't make any sense. You sound like a Leninist or something. Why are you saying that? And it's because it's an honest assessment of events. But on the one hand, people hear that and they like it. Many Americans have this chauvinist mentality. But there's also a lot of people who might have bought into the liberal propaganda associated with these sorts of incidents, with these sorts of actions. And there is tremendous opportunity for organizing there. Because a lot of people, when they hear that, when they hear their president sound like a villain, all of a sudden, they don't like it. They might have bought into the idea that liberal intervention is a necessity to, save gay people in Afghanistan or whatever people are saying. But when Donald Trump says the quiet part out loud, at least in my experience, I've seen a lot of people that previously bought into that idea turn around and say, okay, this is actually unacceptable. It was for oil, my bad. There is, while we've become more violent than ever before, and both Israel and the United States of America are purposely destroying what remains of the argument for the international rule-based order, there are a lot of people who are now recognizing the reality that all of this pain, all of this violence, all of this destruction is simply for extractive purposes, and those initiatives don't even necessarily benefit people, like ordinary people, especially because we're now living 25 years after the failure of the global war on terror. So a lot of Americans understand when you say, I want to go and do regime change, or I want to go and invade this country and I want to get their oil, Americans don't really like that as much. They understand that it doesn't translate to like American bounty or American wealth for them, right? Even if they don't have the tools to communicate it personally, they have this understanding, they have this suspicion that all of this is being done for somebody else, someone that's infinitely wealthier, someone that they'll never actually see. And I think that is why this is a tremendous opportunity for people like yourselves to go out there and organize and talk to people from all different backgrounds, by the way. This is not just a youth movement any longer. As a matter of fact, I see a lot of older people, both in this crowd as well, but certainly older people when I go out to these protests. A lot of people pan the No Kings protest, for example. They're like, oh, it's just liberal stuff. It's disorganized. It's rudderless. What are they protesting? It becomes this like omni cause. Like, oh, it's Donald Trump. But all of the Barbaras and the Debras that I talk to that are 65 plus at these protests, they're pretty radical in the way that they're talking. It's not just about like calling Trump a pedophile, which they do all the time, a shocking amount. But they also are very frustrated. They're not praising they're not praising glory to Yahya Sinwar or anything, but they are very frustrated with what's going on in Gaza. They're very frustrated that we're waging war with Iran, another war of choice, causing tremendous instability. And I don't know, I think that is unlike anything else I've ever experienced before. And I've been doing this with the same anti-imperialist perspective for the past 13 years at this point. God, I'm old. And I have never been able to penetrate collective consciousness in the ways that I have in the last couple of years. And I think a big swing happened because once the dam broke against the very sophisticated, pervasive influence peddling operation of Zionist lobbying and Zionist organizing, Zionist advocacy groups, once people actually realized that all of that was bullshit, that actually caused them to really reconsider what they thought of foreign adversaries that they've learned are evil and barbaric and worthy of domination. So I think in many respects, Palestine has been a formative part of saving the Western world as well. So that's what I feel. Sorry, that was very long and wordy.
No, all good, all good. On a follow-up on that, you said that Trump is the pinnacle, the epitome of U.S. capitalism, of the empire. Could you say a few words to maybe some disillusioned liberals out there, either in chat or in the crowd, who think that maybe by 2028, when Trump is gone, that things will be over? How do you kind of address, what would you like to say to those liberals who think kind of Trump is not a symptom, but Trump is just a misfortune of U.S. capitalism and democracy?
Yeah, vote blue no matter who, baby. That's it. That's all I gotta say. Yeah, Kirsten Gillibrand, 2028. Yeah, of course, Trump is a singular force, perhaps the best demonstration, the human personification of unlimited greed, pedophilic violence. He behaves like a rapist, he is a rapist, he talks like a rapist, he literally, when he's communicating about what he will do to other countries, he also comes across with that same exact energy. It's gross, it's repulsive, people see that, and they're grossed out by it. But he's not alone. He's a representation of all of the same exact capitalist forces that have dominated American politics on both sides of the political spectrum. We have consensus politics in this country on a lot of issues that pertain to the day-to-day existence of ordinary Americans. We have consensus on the privatization of healthcare. This is an incredibly deadly endeavor. 50,000 people, right, die as a consequence of not having access to healthcare. It's unbelievable. We're the only OECD nation on the planet that doesn't offer free healthcare. Medicine shouldn't be paywalled. It's a ridiculous concept. Other countries look at us and they're horrified by it. And yet, if you ask the average American, they think, no, that would be communism, I think, if we were to have, cheap medicine, if we had affordable pharmaceutical products. And it's because someone is making money out there. And if Democrats don't actually address these unique cruelties born out of American existence, born out of American capitalism, if they don't try to solve those problems, if they simply lean into the disasters of Donald Trump, the calamities that he unfolds, and hopefully eke out a marginal victory, both in the midterms and also in the general election, this problem of fascism, this growth of fascism that disgusts you when you see masked thugs that are unaccountable, running around like the Gestapo and kidnapping your neighbors, harassing you, it's not going to go away. And the Democrats that don't even choose to address that problem, the ones that say, oh, well, we have to reform ICE and not abolish it, for example, those Democrats are not going to be your allies. They are going to be your enemies because they are going to be fascist collaborators. So that's what I have to say to the liberals. I tried to remind them of the anger and resentment that they felt in their hearts when Donald Trump was the president, when the 2024 election was happening. But unfortunately, the feckless, cowardly, conciliatory nature of the National Democratic Party once again decided to run to the center, run to the middle, and try to win over these mythical moderate centrist voters. And it failed. It failed again. But it failed in such a spectacular way that it became unavoidable. It became an elephant in the room that virtually every lifelong Democrat had to address. And that's precisely why there's a lot of discontent towards not only Trump, who is unprecedentedly unpopular right now, but a lot of discontent and animosity directed towards the Democrats as well. And you see that in the polling. Democrats are supposed to be very popular right now. They're the opposition party. They're not. They're actually very unpopular, even though they're the opposition party. There's a reason for that. It's because I think Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and people like that are perhaps best representative of this lack of interest in finding real solutions and actually trying to combat fascism in this country. And Americans are frustrated with it. But like I said, there is a little bit of hope. And that hope is that people do want that change. So we have to organize to make sure that they have the political education, they have the tools to be able to address these issues head on, that they organize to sometimes fight back against the growth of fascism in their neighborhoods, as Minneapolis did, and it was very successful. You know, shouts out to Minneapolis. They were able to successfully purge the ICE thugs from their neighborhoods. And that was the first scout, right? That was like Kirstie Noem, whose husband has incredible honkers. I mean, have you guys seen Kirstie Noem's husband's titties?
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable. Anyway, but Kirstie Noem was demoted, downgraded from her position for a litany of different, corruption charges. But that's normally something that is overlooked in this administration. I mean, if you're not doing corruption in this administration, are you really a part of the admin? It's like going to the Bohemian Grove. Like, you have to dip your toes in pedophilia a little bit to be a part of the elite, right? It's kind of like that. They have to do these little schemes. But she was taken out of commission because there was too much pressure. And the Trump administration had to alleviate some of that pressure. They had to take out Greg Bovino and then also Kirstie Noem. And now they're even floating the idea of pushing out Pam Bondi as well. So it's good. The administration is on the back foot now, finally. It took 2 years, but it's happening. But it only happened not because the Democrats actually pushed for it. It only happened because you organized and you pushed for it. So remember that. We do have the power. We can actually set up hurdles. We can actually gum up the works, make it as complicated as possible, make it as difficult as possible, and resist in every facet of our lives in very meaningful ways. I don't mean like 2016 #resistance liberalism. I'm not talking about wearing a pussy hat and going out to the protests to say Orange Man is bad. I'm talking straight up neighborhood watch, mutual aid, direct action, things like that, and also joining sometimes radical organizations as well. So, there's hope.
You actually preempted my next question. Both Iman and I are from Minneapolis, so it's very personal for us.
It is cold as hell in Minneapolis.
Oh, wait, Iman, it was, how cold was it when you were there?
Yeah, I was actually there too. It was like negative 20. Yeah, I know you went to the Target Center, right?
Yeah, I was there for the one day of direct action.
Yeah, I was
and
there too, yeah.
that was unbelievable. That was the worst experience of my life.
Yeah, it was so
Look, I'm a baby, okay? I live in LA. It's always 75 degrees and sunny. It's amazing. But this was I looked, and it was colder in Minneapolis than it was in fucking Alaska.
Yeah.
It was 20 degrees colder in Minneapolis than it was in Alaska. It was insane.
It's still 100,000 people showed up on the streets.
Yeah.
We're out there for 4 hours.
Yeah, that's low-key also where I realized these ice guys must be so racist that they're literally I have to kidnap people, even if it's minus 35 degrees.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but Minneapolis, Minnesota will always turn out. Will always turn out. Something we all can learn from.
Yeah.
But that goes on to my question. So we've seen a lot of mobilizations. This is a very unique time. You've said you've never seen anything like it in the last 12 years that you've been here. In Minnesota especially, we saw the killing of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. We also saw that spark an entire general strike in the state on the 23rd of January. We also saw that following subsequent shutdown nationally, as we also had one on campus. Raise your hand here if you went to the shutdown on the 30th. Yeah. And we're also seeing calls for a general strike on May 1st, on May Day. So what do you think about what this says about the state of the American working class right now, where it's headed, and how to actually fight back, what this indicates, and what you want to say specifically on those actions?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good. I will never cast aside any kind of protest movement, even No Kings, as I always tell people, it's good. You should go there, and you should talk to the people that are there. Just because they don't have the language to communicate exactly what their desires are doesn't mean that they're not with you. They might not understand what ideological tendency that they represent. They might not have the political language or the education, but it doesn't matter. They have a lot of discontent. They have a lot of anger, and it is actually productive anger, right? It's not anger that can be easily misdirected in the way that Republicans do all the time, where they take the working class resentments that people have for understandable reasons and then redirect it back to vulnerable populations as though they are responsible, as though they are your landlords, as they are your bosses, right? That's not the case. So it's up to all of us to get these people on board. That's number one. Number two, as far as direct action or as far as general strikes goes, obviously May Day, America doesn't really have, at least in contemporary society, doesn't really have a strong labor history or a strong understanding of labor history, even though initially it played a big role in labor militancy. I think facilitating a real general strike is going to require a lot more than Reddit posts and social media and getting people together to take time off from work for the day. It's good that people are doing that. It's good that they're showing that they're capable of mobilizing. But I think a real general strike or a significant strike for key sectors is going to require a lot more planning. And there are people who are doing that right now. Sean Fain has talked about floating the idea of a general strike for not just the UAW, which he represents, but also all these other major labor unions. But that's far out there in the future. But for the time being, I think it's important to join organizations and learn a little bit about the tactics, and also develop a sense of community and create a mutual support network. So I think it's good. All this action is good, but obviously it needs to grow, and it needs to be more significant. It needs to strike at the core of capital, the profit centers, because until you do that, until you can show the only power that you have as a working class individual is your productive capabilities. And if you can organize and you can show your bosses, you can show capital owners that you can shut off those productive capabilities through work stoppages, then you become a much more powerful entity. You become a much more powerful representation of the working class. You can make those actual demands that the Democrats currently don't want to listen to and can easily cast aside. You just have to become undeniable, unavoidable. And the only way to do that is through organizing.
Our next question was actually in regards to electoral politics, which I know you kind of touched upon.
It's my favorite.
Yes.
I love voting.
Now more than ever, it's become clear to us that the two-party system, as you discussed before, puts capitalism first, puts the people's interests last, as we see with healthcare most pertinently as well. But yeah, we kind of just wanted to ask, we also saw the Democratic parties attacking you as well, very clearly now as well. Just like, what are the alternatives? It's very clear everyone has become conscious and is done with the two-party system. So what are some alternatives for people to navigate and see electoral politics? I know that there's, especially for the California governor race, there's other candidates like Ramsey Robinson, who's running for governor, and many other great candidates as well. Shout out, but yeah, just want to hear some of your thoughts on how people should approach that.
So this might offend a lot of people, especially because I feel like there's a lot of PSL people here who I love and admire. It's a great organization. But my attitude on this is something that's often critically panned as entryism, which is not the case, right? I believe that what is necessary, at least analyzing where the masses are and how they self-identify, I believe what the masses need currently is class consciousness and political education first and foremost, because they don't have it. They don't understand it. It's something that I've only seen from small business tyrants all the way to big business owners, right? They have class consciousness. They know exactly what they're doing, but the average working class person does not understand this at all. And in order to build class consciousness, what I have seen, at least in the Western world, in Western liberal capitalist democracies, where most parties, even if it's a parliamentary one, or certainly our duopoly that we have here in America, they're bourgeois, liberal, capitalist parties, right? They're not going to have real radicals. They're not going to have socialists. And in America, they don't even have pro-labor candidates in general. But the success that I've seen in terms of membership, in terms of driving up membership for socialist organizations, has always come from electoral victories. Bernie Sanders demonstrated this perfectly. He's an independent senator from Vermont, but he ran as a Democrat in 2016. And a big part of the reason why a lot of people are in this room is in some way, shape, or form directed back to that, right? Bernie Sanders came out and said he's a democratic socialist, and a lot of people are like, what does that mean, really? I don't fully understand it. Now, some people were there already, but it doesn't matter. Many Americans now, including even people like Zohran Mamdani, say that they were influenced by Bernie Sanders in 2016. So that's a very powerful tool. And especially because the Democratic Party is very weak right now, I think there's an opportunity more than ever before to at least seize control of certain races and primary out bad candidates and build as much of a socialist force within the ranks with the express purpose of funneling people into political organizing that allows them to recognize class consciousness and educate themselves by way of membership, and then we see where it goes from that point on. Because I don't think that the Democratic Party is ever going to be anything but the bourgeois party. I don't think the Democratic Party is going to do anything but represent corporate interests. I don't want that to be the case, and maybe we get lucky one day, but I don't care what it's called, right? I don't care if you call it the Democratic Party. I don't care what you call it. I just want the best interests of the working class to be represented by some party, any party, right? And instead of trying to litigate ballot access in every single state, I feel as though the best possible way to organize and create outside pressure systems and become an undeniable force that's unyielding, that is going to fight for working class, for labor related issues and labor rights in general, utilizing the Democratic Party by way of pushing for socialist candidates, like openly socialist candidates, openly candidates that are openly affiliated with organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America, or even the PSL, and pushing for membership that way is the best, at least in my experience, the most successful method.
Yeah.
No claps for that. See, I knew it. I knew it. Everyone's like, revolution now. I have a communism button. I'm just refusing to press it. One day.
Yeah, no, totally. As
we can argue on it if you want. It's fine.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, join an organization, join it now. What we see with the King's protests. This is a great time to talk to your peers, talk to the grandma and grandpas on the street.
Yeah.
Talk to everyone showing up to the May Day strikes, participate in these strikes, because obviously a revolution doesn't happen spontaneously. The labor movement historically in America has been weak because the United States has cracked down systemically on it for decades. The strongest empire, the strongest force we've ever seen in history. So this revolution in America, it's not going to happen immediately. Socialism is not going to happen immediately. It takes small steps. It takes electoral politics. It takes telling people what a general strike is, what happened on January 23rd in Minnesota, and what is happening on May Day in a few months. Actually, 1 month. Wow, time moves fast. But yeah, totally agree. For our last question, before we open it up to the Q&A that you guys have been sending, we are in a room full of Stanford students right now. As you mentioned in your speech before, AI, Palantir, the connections between Silicon Valley, the military-industrial complex, it's been embedded in the actual foundation of Stanford. The DoD would not look like what it does right now, and Stanford would not look like what it does right now without each other. They're intrinsically intertwined. So with that in mind, with Stanford at the core of the Silicon Valley, what do you want to say in front of these rooms of hundreds of students on how they can get involved in the movement and what their role specifically is at the core of the empire?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you have to work, okay? You have to make money, you have to survive. I am not gonna be like, oh, you should not work for any company at all, you should only work for an ethical company. But one thing you can do is take control over your own workplace, and the only way to do that is through labor organizing. So if you do work for one of these companies, I think the best possible thing you could do is work with ASSAULT or some kind of labor union to try to organize your workplace, because I think you can get a lot done if you see the company that you work for start moving in a less ethical direction, which I feel like happens quite a bit in Silicon Valley. I think, what was it, Google was like, don't do any evil or something was their motto, and then they were like, actually, fuck that, we love doing evil. Evil makes us so much money. And for that reason, if there was better organizing in companies like this, then they would have better protection. There were Microsoft employees that came out and spoke out against what Microsoft was doing in collaboration with the Zionist entity, the State of Israel, in terms of I believe it was Azure that they were utilizing, and the employees actually rose up, they spoke out, and they actually did achieve some results, even though I think they got fired for it as well in the process. But if they were organized, if they had labor protections, for example, they would not have had to deal with that. That process would have been far better for them. That process would have been far better as far as being able to survive that process without getting fired, right? Being able to survive that process and maybe even have the legal backing. Because these organizations, or labor unions specifically, are very powerful. They have lawyers that are specifically designed to protect you in a situation like that. And you can communicate with the rest of your workplace. It's not just about gaining autonomy in your workplace so that you can get better benefits and higher wages. and take up more of your surplus labor value, it also gives you the opportunity to say, look, I'm a part of this process. I'm a part of building whatever we're building here, and I personally find it unconscionable what we are, the direction that we're heading, and I want to stop it. And you can, if you are a part of a labor union, you can actually have a say in that process, and that's what it's all about.
Thank you for sharing. I can speak for a lot of students here, but like just the propaganda around labor unions where people don't even know what a labor union is or what a union is. Because of the power that people can grow through unionizing, especially in like tech industries like Palantir, HP. So it was great to hear from you in terms of motivating people to organize around that. Next, we're going to transition into questions from the audience that we're receiving. I can read the first one. The first question is, do you think the collective American memory will remember the insanity of current events in the 2028 elections? Or will crises like the genocide in Gaza and the war on Iran be far behind?
I don't know. Because every day is a fresh nightmare. So I want to say these are important incidents, world-changing events, and they still are ongoing. And not only are they still ongoing, but also even what's happening in Iran right now and the Iranian retaliation towards American imperialism has a lot to do with what has taken place over the course of the last 2.5 years. And I would even go so far as to say that the Western response to that, which wasn't immediately to say, oh yeah, let's go to war with Iran, it's awesome, let's destroy Iran, but instead to say, why are we doing that? Are we doing that for Israel? Why are you saying we're doing that for Israel? That's unbelievable. Like the reaction has the reaction has been the way it is, I think partially because it's expanding on what people have seen thus far. So in the absence of something even more cataclysmic than what we've experienced so far, I don't think that they're going to go away. But Donald Trump can shock the world, so who knows?
Yeah, every day is a new nightmare when you wake up and look at your phone. But anyways, the next question is, could you talk more about your Cuba visit? What was the morale of the people and what does the future hold? And as a person who's involved in organizing for Cuba, what are the strategies? And me personally, I would love to hear more about how you thought about the state of socialism in Cuba and the history, the people, the spirit, everything that you've learned from your experience there.
Yeah. Cuba was amazing. It's one of the. I'm not like a big nature fan at all. I'll just straight up come out and say that. But I was actually shocked by how beautiful Cuba was when we first landed. I was like, damn, it's like a movie. It was the first time for me. So sorry if I'm just saying something stupid. But very quickly, I went from feeling excited to feeling very sad. I talked to Obama's National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes, who played a formative role in the Cuban normalization that took place when Obama was president. One of the only good things he's done as far as foreign policy. Even the Cubans were shocked by it. I asked, no, I'm not even kidding. I asked the foreign vice minister, Cosio, I was like, so how did you guys feel about this when Obama did it? And he was like, we had no idea why he did it. To this day, we don't know why he just kind of gave us that, temporary ease. Temporary respite. But he told me that I would get very sad when I went there to see all the poverty and to see what we've done to this country. And he was right. I was sad. And then very quickly, I became very angry because we have robbed this island, this beautiful island with beautiful people, 10 million people living there, of its unlimited potential. They're still surviving regardless. But it's very obvious that America's impact is everywhere. When you go to the island and you're walking down the streets of Havana and you see these dilapidated buildings, they're beautiful on the exterior, but inside it looks like it's bombed out. And you realize they can't rebuild these houses. And part of that is because purchasing the tools necessary is sometimes either completely restricted due to the American sanctions regime, or people just simply don't have enough money. Now, some might look at that and say, oh, that's because it's communism. Communism has robbed the Cuban people. But from what I saw, at least talking to the people, ordinary Cubans, and certainly extraordinary Cubans as well, people that work in not only positions of power, but like work in academia, people that have played a formative role in developing new medication, and people that are a part of the productive process. One thing was immediately clear to me, that there are arbitrary restrictions that impact every step of Cuban existence, like every step of the process. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a surgeon in the Havana hospital. It's a massive compound. And he told me that sometimes the electricity goes out because since 2019, the Trump administration, under, Trump 1, implemented a secondary sanctions regime on Cuban oil. It's a very restrictive process that limited the amount of oil that was coming into the island. Oil is obviously a necessity for the electricity grid that they have. It also is necessary for transport. It's necessary for refrigeration, whether it be for medication or whether it be for food. It's necessary for everything, right? And they had started restricting all the oil that was coming out of the island in 2019. And this somewhat quiet process and this somewhat invisible process, and it's important that this process is invisible. However, in the last 3 or 4 months, the Trump administration decided to implement a total blockade of oil. So for the past 3 months, with the exception of the Russian oil tanker that just docked in the ports of Havana, Cuba has had no oil whatsoever. So there's like rolling blackouts for 36 hours. Everything is shut down, right? And hospitals also can't keep up with that. There's not enough oil on the island, so the electricity cuts out. And sometimes that electricity cuts out, as the surgeon was telling me, during a surgery. So I was like, what do you do if that happens? And he's like, we just sew up the patient, and we just do it again. We try it again later. A doctor told my colleague and friend Ryan Grimm that in the child care unit, where there's babies on ventilators, and there's a 5-minute window between when the electricity shuts down, when the electricity grid is completely blacked out, and when the generator kicks in. There's a 5-minute window. So nurses and doctors have to rush in to the child care unit and hand pump the ventilators for the 5-minute process. So we're literally just killing children. And we're doing it in this almost automated manner. We're doing this in this invisible manner. And many Americans are completely oblivious to it. And we're doing it to an island that is 90 miles off of our coast. Like, it's so close. It's so accessible. And I mean, the restrictions are endless. Cuban businesses can't get loans to, they can't get loans from any company whatsoever. There's also a tech element in this too, because like the entire world utilizes American tech. So for example, if you're an Italian man, let's say, and you're talking to your friend in Switzerland, and you send him money on Venmo or PayPal, and in the memo you write Cuba Libre, like for the Cuban drink, both of those accounts will get shut down. So it's so arbitrary, it's so ruthless, it's so ridiculous, but it's so pervasive, and that's just like a silly restriction, but it expands far beyond that. It makes it virtually impossible to send money to relatives. It's very difficult to do that, and we've made it that way, and it's totally unnecessary. We've made it that way because we want to present an argument that communism so close to home cannot thrive. It cannot work. It's a failure. It's an ideological failure. This project has to fail, and it hasn't. It's survived in spite of American intervention, partially because of the USSR at times and Venezuela at other times. But in the aftermath of the dissolution of the USSR, things got much harder for Cuba, and now even if they want to implement reforms and marketize their economy, liberalize their economy in certain ways, they can't do it. Once again, I asked the foreign vice minister, would you do Deng Xiaoping style liberalization initiatives, and he said that they were open to reform, but the embargo and the blockade make it impossible, because who would invest in the island if the American government could put sanctions on them at any given moment? Who would invest in the island if the, I believe it's called the Helms-Burton Act from 1996, which is, again, our own domestic legal maneuvering that, once again, makes it impossible to start a business in Cuba or develop anything in Cuba, because the American government, a Cuban American, can go and say, this was a stolen asset for me, and like arbitrarily sue the government of Cuba for stolen assets. Like it's things like that that make it virtually impossible to do any sort of normal commerce. And then we sit around and we act like we're not doing anything to this island at all. Another ridiculous restriction that I personally experienced and also got yelled at quite a bit was the idea that I stayed in a 5-star hotel. Everyone was talking about that. They're like, oh, this rich communist, caviar communist, stays in a 5-star hotel. What a lot of people didn't know is that I didn't have a say in that process. There's only 4 hotels in Havana that the American government allows you to stay in as an American citizen. It's an unbelievable restriction. It's so stupid. And yet, if I did not abide by that, and we had a massive group, and there's not a lot of places when the island is experiencing rolling blackouts that can accommodate hundreds of people, but if I were to stay in any other hotel I wanted to, as I could in any other country, I could go to prison for 10 years and have to pay a fine of $250,000. That's unbelievable. And yet, that is by design. It's the design of the American government. I earlier said there was not a single drop of oil that entered the island. That's also not entirely true. There's 2 places where oil shipments are happening with regular frequency. One is Guantanamo Bay, our torture prison, which has a McDonald's on it, by the way. They have all of the latest gear, all the latest technology. They ship cars to Guantanamo Bay. They can live, Americans fly to Guantanamo Bay and live their normal lives there, and it's right there. It's Cuban soil, and we own it, right? So they have electricity. The other place where America is allowing oil to be shipped to is private businesses. So it's the hotels that we were staying in that the American government allowed us to stay in, otherwise they'd throw us in jail. Those were the hotels that actually had gas that they could put in their generators. And it's so crazy that they have forcibly created class antagonism in a country that has had a successful revolution that turned into a socialist revolution. It wasn't one initially, it was an agrarian revolution, it was a national revolution, it was a revolution for sovereignty, and it's one that turned into a socialist revolution afterwards. And yet, America has tried to forcibly implement class friction in this country by tilting the scales in favor of private businesses, so that there's animosity and anger that regular Cubans feel towards these businesses that are in operation. They want you to look at the lights that are on at the hotel and think, see, this is the government. This is the government's doing. They're keeping the hotel lights on, but your hospitals, your hospital and your energy grid is taken out. And it's very nefarious, very insidious the way they've done this. And I think it's purposefully made invisible through this bureaucratic nightmare that they've created. It's economic warfare, so they can try to destabilize a country without ever firing a bullet or dropping a bomb.
I mean, yeah, but Cuba still lives, right? The people are still struggling. The people are still proud. The people are still surviving. And the socialist system is still surviving despite the strongest U.S. empire and the strongest empire we've ever seen in the history of the world, giving everything it's got at it. And on that note, we see like a socialist system like Cuba, which has completely eradicated HIV and syphilis, like mother-to-child transmission. It has one of the strongest biotechnology industries in the world. I think it rolled out COVID vaccines before the United States did.
I mean, they also had like medical missions where they sent out nurses all across to like European countries that you think would be quote-unquote developed, like Italy, to go out there and like help support the people there. So.
Cuba sends more. It's a very interesting perspective. I talked to the doctors that have done this as well. There was a Palestinian who was actually in medical school in Cuba. There's 250 of them. There's tens of thousands of doctors that come from all around the world, or med school students that come from all around the world to get free education, and then they join these medical missions. And what was really remarkable about it is that down to the neurosurgeon, all the way to these doctors that are going on these international missions, they felt like they were living out revolutionary socialism in the way that they were able to help people. So they do have a very interesting perspective in that regard. It's almost like patriotic to say, but that is certainly something that I saw as well. And yeah, I interviewed Dr. Mitchell Valdez, and he is responsible. He's a very famous neuroscientist. He's responsible for developing the only working Alzheimer's and dementia treatment that's out there right now. And currently it's going through phase 3 trials in Canada, but the roadblocks that the American government has placed upon them in terms of the academic boycott, in terms of rendering academic cooperation impossible, it's unbelievable. He told me, Jack Ma, I believe, wanted to send Sinovacs to the island of Cuba. The American government stopped them. The American government stopped the Cuban island from getting Sinovacs. So they said, all right, fuck it. We're going to make our own vaccine. And they did, right? And then, not only did they develop their own indigenous COVID vaccine, they did what Cuba always does, and they sent it to all these other Latin American countries. So what did America do? America did the exact same thing that they did in the Philippines. They created a vaccine hesitancy campaign in Latin America. They undermined the efficacy of the vaccine, or claimed that the vaccine was not actually good, just as they had done so with Sinovacs in the Philippines, because they were worried that China would engage in soft power initiatives in the island by giving them Sinovacs. So it is so disruptive and is so destructive, our force around the world, and it's something that is happening every single day. And I think if more Americans were aware of it, they would be very frustrated, because this is not something that any normal human being of good conscience is going to look at and say, oh yeah, I'm glad that we're destroying their socialized medicine system. I fucking hate socialized medicine so much. I want to make sure that Cubans don't have it, and I want to make sure that they stop giving it to other countries, because that's what Marco Rubio did, where he actually stopped Guatemala and Jamaica and these smaller countries, these poor countries. He pressured them to stop the Cuban medical missions, which in Jamaica, Cuban doctors provide 100% coverage in Jamaica. So all of these places that are underdeveloped, they're never going to have doctors ever again. So the politicians in Jamaica that actually listened to the pressures and caved to the pressures that Marco Rubio demanded, they might be able to get platinum health care in their own country. They might be able to fly out to the United States of America and get the health care that they need. But the average Jamaican citizen that lives in the countryside is now never going to be able to see another doctor ever again. And that's unfucking believable. And it's something that doesn't benefit anybody at all. It's just pure villain behavior.
The U.S. is blocking free healthcare to virtually anywhere where Cuban doctors are going. Cuban doctors are going to a lot of places. A question from the crowd is, I feel though a lot of organizing is done due to outside pressure like ICE in Palestine. What will it take for people to organize inward around an idea like universal healthcare or nationalizing PG&E? So bringing that socialized medicine back domestically.
How do you organize to nationalize your municipal, like private energy providers? I don't know how to answer that. I've never thought about like organizing to nationalize PG&E, which we should do. I think that's more so just like political pressure campaigns that you engage with. And ballot initiatives that you push for once you are a part of a robust political organization. That's usually how you do it, right? And then there's also, I guess, 501c3s and advocacy groups that are tasked with stuff like this as well. That's not my area of knowledge or expertise, so I can't speak on that well. But I'm pretty sure that there are already, like I said, 501c3s and other organizations that specifically are tasked with trying to make these political changes. Because I don't think it's about work stoppages at that point, or I don't think it's about like protesting outside of PG&E, which, you know, I mean, that it's not going to be unhealthy to do that. You know, I think it's great, but in order to make the necessary changes, I feel like that's when you have to lean into politicians, unfortunately.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, it's very clear with any of these campaigns, there needs to be like a clear strategy and then thinking about the different tactics that go into it. Our next question is from an audience member as well, and I'll just frame it as well. But I mean, we've seen increased repression even with the Prairie Land organizers who are going through a horrible trial as well, and with the Stanford 11 on campus too, who are facing felony charges. The question is, why is it important to support student organizers like the Stanford 11, and why is organizing outside of electoral politics important? And then the third part of the question is, what is an arms embargo?
Oh, great question. Especially that last one came out of nowhere. So it's actually interesting. The arms embargo question is actually kind of tied to the second question, because we saw that the DSA pressured Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and demanded that she subscribe to a full arms embargo and no longer make this distinction between offensive and defensive weapons, because in the past, even though she had never actually voted in a final bill to give any weapons to Israel, in her track record, she's actually very pro-Palestine, one of the most pro-Palestine congresspersons. She did actually defend the principle of funding the Iron Dome when she actively struck down the Marjorie Taylor Greene provision. It was a ballot amendment that would make no distinction between offensive and defensive weapons. And not only did she vote against that provision, she ended up not even voting for the bill, so she didn't actually technically vote to fund Israel at all, but she chose to actually argue against it, right? She chose to argue as to why she was making this distinction. I think it's unnecessary. I think it's ridiculous, because she was one of the first voices in Congress, alongside Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, to openly state that Israel was committing a genocide, but then to turn around months after that, or a year after that, to be like, well, they're committing a genocide, but we also have to give, like, Nazi Germany anti-aircraft weapon systems, while the Dresden campaign is happening. That's ridiculous, right? So it didn't make any sense. But now, due to organizational pressure, due to many conversations that took place since that moment, AOC responded to it, and now she's in favor of a full embargo. Now that's really important. The reason why it's really important is because she's a nationally prominent figure. So the moment that she comes out and says, we are not going to, we shouldn't fund the Iron Dome. We shouldn't fund defensive weapons for Israel because they're not following our laws and they're not following international laws. That's a really important distinction for someone like AOC to make, because all of a sudden that becomes the bottom. That allows people like ourselves to not only advocate for that, which we have been, but then go beyond that, right? Now we can push for sanctions. Now we can push for boycotts and more effectively, right? And so I find that to be a very good thing in general when people like AOC come out and say that, and because as soon as she did that, it became a new litmus test for progressive candidates. Because in the past, you would see the likes of, for example, I'm supporting candidate Abdul El-Sayed in the Michigan Senate. Shouts out to Abdul, who's great. And he's running against Mallory McMorrow, who is the Warrenite in the race, who is like a moderate progressive, like that's the lane that she's trying to occupy, and against Haley Stevens. And Haley Stevens is the AIPAC stooge, right? She's backed by Chuck Schumer, she's backed by AIPAC, they're pumping that race. I mean, she's not very likable, but there's multiple billions of dollars being put into that race. And Mallory McMorrow has, I believe Mallory McMorrow, despite giving a policy paper to AIPAC privately, which was outed later, has what I would call an Israel skeptic style. Like a lot of these new progressive candidates, like moderate progressives, want to lean into the popular momentum of anti-Zionism and anti-Israel sentiment, but they also want to moderate in a way where it's not super offensive to donors. And it's because they're not genuine, right? And that's how you that's how you can expose this distinction by asking them, do you believe in funding the Iron Dome, for example? And if they say yes, then that's how you understand, we're not talking to someone who's sincere. We're not talking to someone who's like principled, who's looking at this seriously. We're just talking to someone who's a politician who is simply telling you what they think is the most calculated response. Abdul al-Sayed, on the other hand, even before AOC came out, was in favor of a total arms embargo, because there are a lot of candidates out there who are genuine, who have put a lot of thought into this, and who have a real opinion. Just like he was also an advocate for Medicare for All for many, many years, right? He worked in public health in the state of Michigan. I mean, he wrote a book about it. He's a little bit of a nerd. But that's an assessment that will be helpful, I think, for a lot of other people. I say to anyone who's listening, like there's 3 standards that you can apply that make it so that if they answer correctly, if a politician answers these questions correctly, they're probably not going to get a lot of money from pro-Israel donors, including J Street, and they certainly might even invite enmity and attention from the likes of AIPAC. It's, do you believe Israel is committing a genocide? Yes or no? Do you believe Israel is an apartheid state? And will you commit to a full arms embargo to the state of Israel? And right now, as it stands, I think if you abide by those 3 standards, most of these organizations that are trying to make sure that they bring in someone who is still pro-Israel but can like play ball, those organizations are probably not going to give you money at that point, and they might even actually, spend against you. So that's how you can tell if someone is. That's how you separate people who are truly invested in this cause versus people who are, unserious and just trying to win your vote.
Thank you for sharing. Also, beyond electoral politics in terms of arms embargo, shout out here in the Bay Area. We have the Peoples for Palestine embargo campaign, and they just actually had a victory and passed the first arms embargo resolution on the whole entire U.S. So, shout out.
Yeah, if that's what you were asking me to talk about, that's, the labor union in this country, unfortunately, is somewhat corporate.
Building towards.
Unfortunately, labor militancy is a lost art in this country. It is perhaps best demonstrated by the Italian labor unions with what they've done out there. I mean, it's unbelievable. They'll just shut down the entire country for a week if they feel like it. Hopefully, inshallah. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. We are a little over time, so everyone give a round of applause for Hasan Piker. We are so grateful. Even with all of the logistical fireballs the university threw at us, we were able to pull through and have this event happen. A few things before we close out that we'd like to plug.
Yeah, so if you guys look around, every chair should have a QR code. So please fill out that form before you leave. That will make sure that everyone's plugged into the different organizations. This is just a stepping stone into the long-term organizing we're all going to do in this room. And shout out to Tech for Liberation, Stanford Asian American Action Committee, and Stanford SJP for all their organizing today. And I also wanted to plug an event happening next week with the Black Student Union. It's called Building Black Power, the history of Black political organizing in the Bay Area. It'll be in 2 weeks, April 15th at 8 p.m. at the BCSC Community Room, so please show up. You want to talk about staff class?
Yeah, so Hasan, you talked about how political education is the first step towards a mass movement, a mass socialist movement in the United States. We completely agree. I'm actually the political education chair of the Stanford Asian American Action Committee. So on that note, if you want to get educated, if you want to learn more about socialism, about imperialism, what those 2 words even mean, we have a SAC class. This is every Monday, 6 to 7:20 p.m., Wallenberg Hall, room 318. Or you can just go on Access and search up Asian American Studies 9SI. We're an official class of the university, and I am teaching it.
One more pub as well. The Faculty for Justice in Palestine is also hosting a class a Palestine class in CSRU 33, and it'll be every Friday from 10:30 to 12:20, so please go on Access and check it out soon.
All right, one final